This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Thank you for tuning into the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, where we talk the latest and greatest news in the world of sports. As always, I am Alex. Tuesday, December 20th, as we approach Christmas. I know everybody's getting excited about that. On Tuesday, as always, it's just me. Ben will be back tomorrow, as well as Anthony. But I'm riding solo today. We'll be talking about last night's Monday Night Football game between the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Redskins in a moment. And a game we talked about yesterday in the world of college football, the Miami Beach Bowl between the Central Michigan Chippewas and the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes. And then after the break, we'll get into a couple of pieces of news in relation to the NFL in regards to interim head coaching and the Houston Texans deciding to go a certain way with a different quarterback. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then we're going to end the show talking on some NBA injuries, a couple of notable big-name players that will be out for a few weeks. Starting about now, they have to have surgery, so just how it has to go, and we're going to end the show talking about that. But anyways, let's go ahead and start with last night's Monday Night Football game, and that was between the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Redskins. The Carolina Panthers win this one 26-15 to move to 6-8 on the year. Washington drops to 6-1 on the year. You had a good game from both quarterbacks for the most part. Cam Newton, 21 for 37, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Only sacked twice. It's pretty good. If you look at some of the numbers he's been taking this year, obviously, Jonathan Stewart, 25 carries, 132 yards for a team total of 148 if you include all of the rushes in that one. No touchdowns on the ground in this one. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, was 32 for 47 for 315 yards, though he did have an interception. Their running game, though, was non-existent. Kirk Cousins was the leading rusher with 2 carries for 11 yards, followed by Chris Thompson, 2 for 10, and Robert Kelly, 9 for 8 for a total of 13 for 29 as a team, and a touchdown if you include Robert Kelly's. In terms of the receiving game, you had Deshaun Jackson, 7 receptions for 111 yards. No receiving touchdowns again, though, because the only significant pass, I guess you could say, but significant outcome of a pass, in regards to good or bad, was the interception. We look at the Carolina Panthers, and their receiving numbers were pretty good. You had Greg Olsen, 6 for 85 and 1. 6 for 85. Ted Ginn was 4 for 64 and 1. You look at their defense. Jonathan Stewart played well. He didn't give up a fumble, so the Washington defense did handle that a bit, started to get to the ball. But the real problem was the fumbling on the Washington side. So Carolina's defense really handled that. They caused a fumble on Kirk Cousins and Jamison Crowder, each recovering both. Kurt Coleman had the interception in return for 37 yards. So, in this game, we picked the Redskins. They are a better team, one would say, especially this year. You look at their records. One game separate now, in a sense, if you include that tie, maybe 2 games. But this is still a Panthers team that has a lot of the pieces that took it to the Super Bowl last year. You look at the Washington Redskins, and you kind of wonder, okay, that was an interesting game from them. And I wonder, what was the problem? It could have been poor tackling, poor defense. There's a lot of things that can go into it in this one. And what it really looked like is, besides the passing game, Kirk Cousins threw for 47 times, but that's not what you want to do. You need some kind of balance. The Panthers had balance. 148 yards rushing, technically speaking, because of the sack, 290 yards passing. That's good. You need that. 315 yards passing and 29 yards rushing. That's not a good way to win games. This was a low-scoring game early. We had back-to-back field goals that kept it tied until just before the end of the first quarter, in where those are the first two, where Ted Ginn had a 30-yard touchdown pass from Cam Newton to put him up 10-3. In the second quarter, we had another field goal from Graham Gano And then we had a Robert Kelly 5-yard touchdown, but the PAT afterwards was missed. So it was 13-9 going into halftime. We had the Mike Tolbert receiving touchdown from Cam Newton, and then another field goal from Graham Gano. Dustin Hopkins added a couple of field goals in the fourth, and then Graham Gano again with another field goal. Really a big part of their win, if you ask me, having 4 field goals totaled in regards to scoring. So it was just really capitalizing on moments. The Redskins were 2-12 on third down. It wasn't much better for the Panthers, who were 4-15 on third down. So that's not obviously where you want to be in regards to converting, but they're pretty average and close in a lot of other aspects. They both had 14 total drives. Yards per play were maybe a half, roughly different. You know, 6.1 to 5.5. Again, the rushing number's horrible. Red zone attempts 1 for 4, 1 for 3. So very similar. I mean, penalties weren't killer. 7 for 70 for the Redskins, 6 for 62 for the Panthers. But the turnovers, that's another thing. 2 fumbles and interception, 3 turnovers to nothing. That'll help you lose to even some of the bad teams. So unfortunately, the Redskins weren't able to get it done. Again, they move on to 7-6-1 on the year. They're sitting in third place in their division behind the 10-win Giants and obviously the best team in the NFC, the Dallas Cowboys. And the Carolina Panthers, they're not probably making the playoffs, obviously, sitting in last place in their division. I don't know for sure if they're eliminated. I haven't seen the absolutely eliminated little graphic during the week of football. But they are sitting in last place at 6-8. They are tied with New Orleans, but you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who played on Sunday night at 8-6, and then Atlanta's is sitting at 9-5. So probably not a way to make it that easy for them. Now let's real quick look at the Miami Beach Bowl between the Chippewas and the Golden Hurricanes. In this one, Tulsa defeats Central Michigan Chippewas 55-10 to finish the year at 10-3 with a Miami Beach Bowl win. Tulsa's quarterback, Dane Evans, went 28 for 38, 304 yards, and a whopping 5 touchdowns in this game. They also had 2 100-yard rushers. You had D'Angelo Brewer, 17 carries for 105, and James Flounders, 17 as well for 100 and a score. As a team that had 261 yards rushing, and don't look past receiver Josh Atkinson, who had 12 receptions for 131 yards and a score, and then Kevin Lucas, 7 for 72 and 3 scores. It's a pretty good day offensively for the Golden Hurricane. We look over at the Chippewas. Cooper Rush, their quarterback, 24 for 49, 241, but 3 interceptions on the day. Their rushing yards as a team in regards to 5 different rushes in this one, 22 for 83 and 1. Not horrible numbers, but when you have the other team, the quarterback alone, throwing 5 touchdowns, 2 100-yard rushers, almost 100.5 yards receiving by one receiver. The offense was just clicking. And sometimes you just don't have it in regards to keeping up with that. That's football, especially college football. The variety in college football sometimes they'll get you. We look at their scoring charts. I mean, by the end of the first, it was already 10-3. By halftime, it was 27-3. At one point, it was 48-3 and 55-3 after a Jesse Brudebaker 66-yard interception return by the Golden Hurricane. And with 9:21 left in the fourth, we had the touchdown run by the Chippewas and Ray Hayes and his 13 yards. So at one point, 55-3. I would say that's definitely a manhandling offensive performance. Next, in regards to bowl games, we have a game today. That's the only bowl game we have today. We do have games tomorrow as well, which we'll talk about tomorrow. But today we have the Boca Ration Bowl between the Memphis Tigers and the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. I'm going to go Western Kentucky in this one. They're sitting at 10-3 on the year. Have a chance to eclipse 10 wins this season. Memphis sitting at 8-4. Not a bad year, but with the way Western Kentucky plays, the way their offense plays, quarterback only threw 6 interceptions all year. The running back had 24 total touchdowns on the ground. The leading receiver, 16 touchdowns in regards to him. and they're winners of 5 of their last 5 games, which is only, still, it's not like Memphis is sitting there just droughting. They're winners of 3 of their last 5. So I'm going to go Western Kentucky. Now we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk some coaching news and some quarterback changing news for a team that is still very much in the playoff conversation there in the AFC South. So let's take our first break, and we'll be right back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. So we're going to start with news that broke not long after we finished the sports show yesterday. As Ben mentioned, we have these TVs in front of us now up on the wall. And it broke about maybe 5-10 minutes after we finished the show right there on the breaking news line on Sports Center. So that was pretty cool. Get that first one of those. But the Jacksonville Jaguars obviously had fired Gus Bradley at the moment, at the time that they did this, about 24 hours, actually less than the firing of Gus Bradley with 2 games left in the season. But they have named Doug Marrone as their interim head coach. Marrone had been Jacksonville's assistant head coach and offensive line coach since January of last year. He joined the team after 2 seasons as the head coach in Buffalo, where he guided the Bills to a 15-17 record before deciding to opt out of his contract because of the uncertainty over possible organizational changes. Marrone coached the Bills to a 9-7 record in 2014, which is to date their only winning record since 2004. This makes sense to me with having the head coaching background there for Marrone. Similar team in regards to the Bills and the Jaguars, where they weren't exactly the greatest team when he was there. Bradley did hire Marrone in 2015 to replace his offensive line coach, George Yarno, who left the team after being diagnosed with cancer. So he's been there for a little while now. Marrone did interview with 5 teams that had head coaching vacancies after the 2015 season going into this season, but he was not offered a job. For those who are aware of Doug Marrone's resume, I suppose you could say, he's also been a head coach in college. He was 25-25 lifetime at Syracuse from 2009 to 2012 before he was hired to go coach the Bills. And obviously we know that Gus Bradley was fired Sunday, as a matter of fact, after they lost their 9th straight game with a 21-20 defeat to the Houston Texans, whom I will talk about in a minute. With Bradley, the Jaguars went 14-48 under 4 seasons of Bradley coaching. I'm interested to see if they'll be looking at Marrone as a possible replacement. I've seen a lot of names looked at for the Jaguars job, at least not looked at, as, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But rumored names as far as Tom Coughlin, Todd Haley, Josh McDaniels. Tom Coughlin was the first coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars when they became a team, and he did a lot for that team, if you look at it in that sense. I'm interested to see exactly who gets this job. Personally, as a Steeler fan, I want Todd Haley to stay where he's at, but I do understand that he is very capable of a head coaching job, as he was the head coach of the Chiefs for such a long time. I would say Terrell Austin, the Detroit Lions defensive coordinator, who actually interviewed for some jobs back in January but ended up back in Detroit. I would say he's somebody who you could be looking at. Tom Coughlin, like I said, even though he's 70 years old, Jacksonville was his, that was his job when they first became a team. He led them to 4 playoff berths, as a matter of fact, and an appearance in the AFC Championship game after the 1999 season. It could work. Todd Haley, as I mentioned, he's currently the offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jim Harbaugh is somebody that's talked about, but I feel like the one that people talk about most with him is the Los Angeles Rams. And then obviously you have the possibility of Doug Marrone, depending on where they want to go from there. Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. Obviously he has coached before with the Denver Broncos. where he went 8-8 and 3-9 before being fired with a month remaining in the 2010 season before becoming the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. And then a couple of other names you can look at. You have Sam McDermott. He is the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator. Obviously, he's led them to some pretty good seasons the last few years. Kyle Shanahan, offensive coordinator for the Falcons, and obviously a very good family line there. And then you can also look at Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator Harold Goodwin. Probably Matt Patricia. He's somebody that's looked at every year, the defensive coordinator for the Patriots. Somebody he looks at, his name's always mentioned, but it's never for a significant amount of time. So it seems like it's mentioned really quickly, and I think he seems content there in Foxborough. You look at the Panthers and their offensive coordinator, Mike Shula, obviously a big name for him there. Former Lions coach and Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, and defensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and former Falcons coach Mike Smith. So a lot of names out there. It'd be really interesting to see where and why they fired Gus with 2 games left. We knew he was going to get fired anyway. It should have happened maybe 6 games ago instead of with 2 games left. If you really want to get the head start on somebody, I wonder who that is. All right, and let's end this segment off talking about quarterback play here. This is something else that was announced not long after we actually finished the football show. So the show that follows this show, the show after the show, we had some news from Houston. We saw that Brock Osweiler was pulled from the game on Sunday. Well, it has been announced that Tom Savage, the quarterback in which Osweiler is pulled for, will start at quarterback on Saturday against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Texans obviously gave Osweiler that huge 4-year, $72 million contract in March, though it's not really turning out for him very well. I saw a funny thing from Trey Wingo yesterday on SportsCenter that said last year the Broncos benched their quarterback, although they were winning games in spite of him, and that was an injured Peyton Manning at one point, and when he came back, it was Brock Osweiler. Now, Brock Osweiler is that same quarterback that has been benched because the team is winning in spite of their quarterback. Obviously, Osweiler is not doing overly well this year. Savage came into the game. He finished the day 23 for 36, 260 yards, and that was only after coming in the second half. Osweiler, at the time that he was taken out, was 6 for 11 for 48 yards and 2 interceptions. I'm interested to see where they go from this. The Houston Texans are in the playoffs right now. As it stands, if the season was to end today, we would have a Houston Texans playoff game that would be started by Tom Savage. I've always liked Tom Savage. He is a big guy, came out of Pittsburgh. He was the kind of quarterback you look at as the prototypical quarterback. He had a strong arm. He's a big fella. He stands in the pocket. He's tall or in there, He's somebody that you look at with potential because, the intangibles that he possesses, And you look at Houston right now, they are in first place. Like I said, they have an 8-6 record. Tennessee's right on their tail, though. So that's what makes things most interesting. And they have a game head-to-head that could very likely decide the division in Week 17 with the Titans. Morning game there on New Year's Day. Now we look at the numbers. This team, again, we have won 8 games in spite of bad quarterback play. And just how bad would that be? Well, they're averaging 198.4 passing yards a game. That is 30th in the NFL. And they're currently tied for 28th in the NFL with 17.7 points a game. The reason they're winning is the rushing game, which is 5th in the NFL with 122.7 yards a game. And you look at their points against, they're only really giving up 21, which is 12th in the NFL. So that's a lot, in my opinion, of the reason why the Texans have won as many games as they have this year, is you really have the skill on both sides of the ball. Now, looking at Osweiler's numbers for a quarterback that signed this big deal, look at 2016, he currently has thrown for 2,704 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions. He's fumbled the ball 5 times. He's sitting at a season QBR of 55. You look at last year where he wasn't even starting full time. He threw for 4,830 yards, 25 touchdowns, 22 interceptions. Always been an issue for him on the turnover side, but one expected, when it was really his call, really his ball, and they can move from there, maybe the turnovers would stop. They really haven't. Sorry to break it to you, Brock. it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. Again, if the season ended today, they'd be in the playoffs, and Tom Savage would be starting his very own playoff game. All right, let's take our last break. We're going to be right back here. We're going to talk a couple of injuries on the basketball front. Some key players that are going to be missing a few weeks here with some injuries. So we're going to take that last break, and we'll be right back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
And we are back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. So we have two names, one a little bit bigger than the other, but I cover it all, so I will not show favoritism. The Rockets are awaiting a MRI from Clint Capella. He missed Tuesday's game, though, against the Spurs with a left leg injury. It's potentially bad. He could miss a few weeks here. He'll be going into MRI yesterday. They're still waiting for news from that, but he's believed to have a broken fibula, which would keep him out a multiple of weeks. He's averaging 11.8 points a game as it stands right now, 8 rebounds and 28 starts, but he left in the third quarter of the Rockets game against the Timberwolves. If he's unavailable for an extended period amount of time, they expect the Rockets to start Nene for the majority of the games, though Montrezl Harrell could also get some start. Now, that is not the big injury news. The bigger injury news in this one is Blake Griffin. Clippers have said that Blake Griffin will have to have knee surgery, and he's expected to miss 3 to 6 weeks. Now, that could be better case scenario, only 3 weeks, or it could be sitting closer to 6 weeks, and you're out a player for a few decent amount of games. But he's going to be having arthroscopic knee surgery, and he's expected to miss that amount of time, and they announced that yesterday. So he's having this procedure to remove loose bodies from his right knee. According to the team, he missed a game last week because of a sore right knee, but he's just been playing through it since the issue began. Doc Rivers told the Orange County Register that the injury was not suffered during their loss against Golden State, but it was more of a cumulative in nature kind of injury. For those who remember, Griffin missed his rookie season with an injury to his left knee. He had surgery for it in 2010. He also missed 3 months last season after breaking his right hand in a fight in January with Clippers' former assistant equipment manager, for those who forgot all about that and wanted to be reminded. Griffin has played just 35 regular season games and then re-injured his left quadricep tendon in April during the playoffs, so he missed the final 2 games of the Clippers' first-round series loss to the Trailblazers. As it stands right now, Blake Griffin is averaging 21.2 points, 8.8 rebounds, about half of a block, and that is in just 26 games this season. One more thing we can look at in regards to some injuries and some just notable things to keep an eye on. Kevin Love of the Cleveland Cavaliers is going to be missing some time, at least tonight for sure. Also with some knee swelling and some pain in his knee as well. Cavaliers coach Tyronn Lue announced on Monday that he would not be playing on Tuesday. He's questionable for Wednesday for the second half of Cleveland's home-and-home matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks. Love banged knees with Lakers forward Larry Nance Jr. in their win on Saturday. And, this has been a thing with Love for a while now. He's been playing through injuries. He played through the collision. He finished with 27 points and actually a season-high 17 rebounds in this game. But the knee, I assume, swelled up in the meantime. Kevin is currently averaging 22.3 points a game, 10.7 rebounds, and a career-high 1.1 steals per game this year. So his field goal percentage as well as his three-point percentage are also the best he's ever shot since 2010-11, averaging 46.8 in field goal percentage and 41.2 there from three-point land. Love has only played in 24 of the Cavs' 25 games this year, so that's pretty good. Not to say only, but sitting out obviously last week, in which Lue kept all 3 of the quote-unquote big 3 of the Cavaliers out of the game for, one would say, rest, I guess. So he has not played in just one game. That's pretty good, for a guy, again, that I mentioned, has had problems staying healthy at times. We had, just real quick as well, 5 games last night on the NBA stand front. I will read them out to you because that is what I do. We had the Denver Nuggets taking on the Dallas Mavericks, and then Denver won this one by 10, 117-107. Minnesota Timberwolves defeat the Phoenix Suns 115-108. The Atlanta Hawks over the OKC Thunder 110-108. We had the Chicago Bulls hammering it down on the Detroit Pistons 113-82. And we had the Indiana Pacers and the Washington Wizards 107-105 in favor of the Pacers, the closest game of the night. So we're going to go ahead and finish the show the same way we start every show, and that's where I say thank you so much for tuning into the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, where we talk all the latest and greatest news in the world of sports. Ben will be back tomorrow. Anthony will be here tomorrow, and we'll be talking everything and all that you can imagine in the wide world of sports. Don't forget to check out tonight's bowl game and any basketball that comes up. And, of course, we're heading into a weekend of Saturday football as well. Not to mention, we have a Thursday night game as well. Lots of football, lots of sports. I'm excited, you're excited, everybody's excited. Thank you so much for listening. For Ben, for Anthony, as always, I'm Alex. Thank you so much for listening, guys. We'll see you tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy your sports.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.